Thank you. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Ketan Kapadia, and I'm the Global Chair for the WZCC-WE Women Entrepreneurs Group. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this fifth and final Global WE webinar for 2024. The topic is Empowering Yourself at the Workplace with Advocate Sana Hakim from Mumbai, who is going to take us on an interactive journey of empowering ourselves at our workplaces. The session will begin with a brief message from Captain Percy Master, WZCC Global President. Then we will have Farida Debu from the WZCC Pune chapter introduce our speaker. Sana will conduct an interactive webinar. So please, may I request everybody to mute yourselves? Thank you. Sana Hakim will conduct an interactive webinar. So please be ready to respond to her using the chat box and also put your questions in that for her to follow up. The vote of thanks will be given by Yasmin Medora from the WZCC Houston chapter. So you can say this is a truly global webinar where we have participation from all chapters, including Bangalore chapter, who also did the flyer for this webinar. Thank you, Bangalore. We just celebrated Thanksgiving in USA, and so a big thank you to all of you for participating in this webinar today. So go ahead, Percy.
Yeah. Thank you, Ketan, and greetings from WZCC to all the participants today. I see also more men on this program because I think they are really worried that what is going to happen with the legal luminary which we have got today. So also welcome to Advocate Sana Hakim for today's program. And we are also fortunate to have a few legal people on the in the participants. So that is also a good sign. And as we all know, nowadays sexual harassment is a very concerned subject all over the world, and especially in offices where women are also working. And so there are certain guidelines for the government of India, and I'm sure it is elsewhere also, how women can be protected during the workplace and how certain guidelines can be implemented. But just to give a little background on this, our religion teaches you gender equality, because way back in ancient Iran, when Cyrus was the ruler, we had a gender equality enforced, and the women during that period were allowed to do business, take part in politics, and had equal rights in Iran. And of course, now all over, after 1,000 years, we see we are trying to give more power to women, because woman is a multitasking person who does a lot of things, looks after the family, does a job, puts children into school, and a lot of multitasking is done by the woman. And as they say, if you teach a woman, you teach the world. So, the education for women is very important. And if any country has to succeed, women have to be in the forefront. That was what was said by a lot of people, and of course by the government also. So education has taken a forefront in India, as you all know. Girl child education is very, very important. It is free now for girls up to matriculation, and even in universities also. So with this very important topic being discussed today, I think we have to all be very vigilant to see that we study properly what is being discussed and then implement it in our workplaces and our environment. So thank you very much for today's program, Ketayun. You have been doing a wonderful job. Every month we have a very selected person to interview and give their advice, and that is a learning experience for all of us. So I hope that you will continue in the years to come when you are in charge of WE. So women empowerment is what we need to enforce. And this WZCC, it is in our ecosystem, in our strategic plan. One of the trust areas is women empowerment. and that is what we all encourage. So best of luck to all the ladies, and over to you, Ketayan.
Thank you, Percy, for the kind words and for the encouragement you give to the WE group in WZCC. And of course, to my core team also, who's on the call today. Next, we would go to Farida Debu to introduce the speaker. Go ahead, Farida. You need
Farida,
to
you're on
unmute.
mute.
Thank you, Ketayun. A very warm welcome to everyone across the globe who's attending the webinar today. Our speaker, Advocate Sana Hakim, is going to talk on a very relevant topic in today's time: empowering yourself at the workplace. Workplaces are not immune to instances of violations. One of the most reported form is sexual harassment. There are several laws to address this. Apart from the legalities, one needs to understand the psychological and behavioral nuances of this form of conduct. This information will ensure prevention and mitigation. Sana in this webinar will cover topics like what exactly is sexual harassment, the obligations of the employers and the employees, how this has impacted various individuals. She will touch upon these through an interactive session of case studies and real-life scenarios. Advocate Sana Hakim is a subject matter expert practicing in the space of diversity and inclusion, family and criminal laws for more than 15 years now. She is the co-founding member of Equilibrio Adversary, which is a firm of lawyers and psychologists. The firm is empaneled with more than 500 plus organizations pan-India across sectors to assist and support with compliances on the law for more than 7 years. She has training experience of conducting over 2,000 plus trainings for various stakeholders on the above subject matter. Over to you, Sana.
Thank you so much, Farida, for the kind words in the introduction. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, in whichever part, considering whichever part of the world you are watching this from. Thank you so much for joining in. I know it's very early morning in some parts of the world from folks where they are joining in. So, and even for folks who are joining in across India, thank you very much. This is indeed a very important topic, and yes, it is going to be an interactive session. Just wanted to confirm if everybody can confirm over chat or maybe unmute yourselves. If you can, am I audible and visible to everyone?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I can see some thumbs up and okay. Thank you so much for that confirmation. And yes, it's and this is you might agree like this is not a new term. Sexual harassment is not it's not a term that people are not aware about. But yes, there are certain aspects that we will be discussing today. A lot of real life case scenarios and examples will be shared. How does that really pan out in my experiences? Because the firm that Farida mentioned, Equilibrium Advisory, when we are in panel with organizations, what we do is we become organically the part of inquiries of complaints of sexual harassment. So those are the real life case scenarios that we'll be sharing today. As I'm talking about them, I will not be naming any organization specific or any individual specific. Since this is an interactive session, there might be certain experience sharing that might happen in today's session. A couple of things that I'd like to maybe mention here. If you do choose to share any experience or any situation which you'd like to discuss in this forum, please feel free to do that. But we'll just keep in mind about not sharing any information about the individual specific or the organization specific. I hope everybody is aligned with that, considering the confidentiality and the privacy of the parties and stakeholders involved. Over and above that, this is the kind of examples and situations and scenarios that I'm about to share. Also, trigger warning there because some are it can be triggering for a few folks on the call. So apologize for that in advance if it does. And at any point of time, if you feel triggered or if you feel uncomfortable, you all can step out of the meeting and come back as and when you are comfortable. No question is a stupid question or a weird question. So please do not hold back in interrupting me and giving your perspective. Even if there is something I'm sharing, if you're not aligned with it, if there is an uh, adverse view to it, also feel free to interrupt me and sort of give that view as well. At any point in time, we will not assume things about people or folks asking any questions, right? There won't be any assumptions. So this is the hope is to create a safe space for everybody to have nuanced conversations. Is everybody aligned with that? All okay with this? Okay.
Yes.
So I will not be holding back any asking any questions, and nor should you. And please address me as Sana. I'm not Miss Sana, Advocate Sana. Please feel free to just call me by my first name. I will also be referring to everybody by their first name if that's all right for people if I want to respond to folks. I hope that's fine as well. Okay, fantastic. All right. Just allow me a moment while I share my screen. Yes. Please do let me know if it's visible.
Yes.
Sure. Okay. Thank you so much. And Farida also mentioned that today's session is going to also cover. So I'm a litigation lawyer by profession. I'm a co-founding partner at Equilibrium Advisory, but we are a firm of lawyers and mental health professionals. And that's where the psychological elements come into play. That also plays a pivotal role in our interactions when we are conducting sessions on these topics, and also when we are conducting inquiries when it comes to complaints of sexual harassment. Everybody would agree that there are a lot of psychosocial underpinnings even to these kind of conversations, which one needs to keep in mind. So that's what we'll be covering today, and that's how the team also comprises. And as we move forward, we will also work and we will also ask questions and understand certain aspects about not just the psychological and behavioral part of it, but also understanding what really causes it, what are the impact elements, and how does one even try to prevent it. So the whole idea of today's session is, yes, of course, to understand what is sexual harassment, but also to understand whether it is, well, prevention is better than cure, right? So what are the ways and means in which we can even prevent it, or whether it's preventable or not, right? And we I just maybe start off with this question, if I may request everybody to maybe engage with this question. Do you think sexual harassment is industry specific? Do you think it in a particular, because we're talking about workplaces, right? So do you think it's only prevalent in a particular kind of industry?
No,
No.
I think
No.
it is office specific, I think,
Okay.
it is individual specific and not place specific.
Okay. When you say not place specific, you mean not industry specific, just the kind of individuals in a particular space.
It depends upon the culture of the organization. There's so
Yeah.
much more that happens.
Sure.
So it is not, it can happen anywhere.
No, interesting you mentioned culture, Shana. That definitely plays a role in not just sexual harassment, but a lot of other, conduct related concerns and issues for sure.
Yeah.
Right. And any other views? I mean, but what I understand from you
You're
that
talking about manufacturing that everyone's on the shop floor. So is
okay,
that's a different type of interaction on the shop
that's
floor.
right.
It's a different
That's right.
interaction in an office environment. It's a
Mhm.
different, so
Yeah.
it is industry specific. It's blue collar, white collar. It's automotive or it's design or it's jewelry. There are
All
some
right.
skills and there are some brick and mortar business. So it depends. Every place is a different thing.
Sure. Okay, so I hear you, and I do agree with that, answer as well to a great degree that yes, it is not industry specific. But say if you had to take a guess, because there have been statistics out in the public domain, and there have been some research that we have also been doing. We wanted to understand, is it prevalent in a particular industry? Okay, so we asked ourselves that question. We also went out and did some research. We also searched in the public domain and saw, okay, what are the numbers really saying? So if you had to pick or guess even, and that can be a guess, and there are no right and wrong answers here, which industry do you think might be having the most amount of, say, reported instances of sexual harassment, according to you? I'm asking you to guess. And I can see some responses on chat as well. It's across workplaces, and yes, it can happen in your residential areas as well, for sure. Yeah. But if you had to guess, and I'm asking you to guess, it's a very conscious question there.
I think
Which
in office
industry?
areas, Sana, in office areas where women and men both are working, it depends on the close proximity of how they are placed while working, you know. Like in our office, we make it a point that all women are in one area concentrated. And we also have a CCTV so that we can monitor what is
Okay.
happening. So
Okay.
these sort of precautions are required, you know.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. So what I hear from you, Percy, is that maybe where there are a group of men and women working in close physical spaces, is that what you're saying? Where there is not much physical spaces or there's not much leeway for physical, like sort of physical seating, so as to speak, between folks who are sitting in the office space, right?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I can also see some responses of a chat which talks about film industry, hospitality industry. Okay. Most probably in
It
call
also happen to
centers.
men, Sana. It
Yeah.
could also happen to men.
Yes.
It's not only the women.
It's not only the women.
So
Absolutely.
sexual harassment is not gender specific.
Yeah.
You have
I
to
hear you.
understand that it is a problem for all. It's how you manage it and what the culture of the organization, where you're working. It is something that people have to be aware of, whether you're man or woman. It
Right.
can happen to anybody.
Right. I hear you, Shanaz, and I think I agree with you as well. If you see the vertical under which we function is called the posh equally vertical, right? So we do
Yes.
believe and sort of adhere to the analogy of it being not gender specific but gender agnostic, and yes, it can impact anyone.
Absolutely.
But we're looking at the numbers right now, right? And if I have to speak from Indian context or Indian scheme of things, there is a law which is gender specific. If I have to look at the numbers also, they're pretty sort of lopsided when it comes to one particular gender. And we'll also discuss of other genders, not just men, but even other genders, as to how they are impacted, and then what is a recourse and remedy available for them,
Yes.
and what happens to them, and they are the understanding of that spectrum as well. So sorry, coming back to the question, I can see a lot of really great responses, and I'm also presuming, and this is just a presumption, and please feel free to correct my presumption if it's not right. When you say film industry, hospitality industry, call centers, is it because of the age groups that are there in that particular industry, and also the kind of work and the culture prevalent in that industry? Would that understanding be correct for those folks who have mentioned and specified industries?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, for sure.
Because
Okay,
that is an industry where, see, in hospitality industry also, women work late hours. And in the film industry also, there is close proximity. So probably there it's more likely to happen. Not that it doesn't happen in other places,
Otherwise,
but
yeah.
more probable in these areas.
Sure. Okay. Thank you so much for these responses. I can also see construction industry, again, coming from the step of it being maybe heavily male dominated, and maybe females being more prone and vulnerable to this kind of conduct. So here's what it says. Now, United Nations took out this very interesting statistic where it says that 1 in every 3 women in her lifetime has experienced sexual harassment some point in time in their lives, and 1 in every 5 men have experienced sexual harassment sometime in their life. But if I have to draw it in industry specific sort of a statistic, that's what it says. In the last financial year, it was the most amount of reported cases came from the BFSI, which is the banking and financial sector, and the IT industry, 83%. Now, these are the reported instances. But I also want to highlight one more aspect. Now, see, if you look at the numbers here, it says 1 in every 3 women and 1 in every 5 women. So roughly 30% of women and say 20% of men, as per these statistics, have undergone sexual harassment, right? But there was a very interesting report. Although there are no formal statistics or there is no formal survey or research done by India, but at a global level, they also did another industry, because somebody mentioned about the film and the entertainment industry. And there was an alarming rise in the number of cases which are not reported, but people who have experienced sexual harassment. And would you want to take a guess of the percentage of people who have experienced, not reported, but experienced sexual harassment in the film and entertainment industry? Again, I'm just asking you to take guesses. So
Almost 50%.
90%, Percy.
Oh, good. My
Yeah.
God.
And out of those 90%, not many had reported. In fact, a very minuscule sort of a percentage of the folks who had experienced. And yes, most of them were women who were at the receiving end, not to rule out the other genders. Like I said, we will be talking about them as well. But the numbers, and we also had done our own research. So we had done a research for the past 2 years and of the number of cases and instances that we have handled back at the firm. And this was also true for our research. If you see how we have divided, and if you see what is on the screen currently right now, right from the aviation industry, which had only 8% cases, BFSI took a larger hit. And you know what, I'm not looking at it in a very pessimistic manner. Please understand, these are reported instances. So when I say that BFSI sector has the amount of largest reported instances, it may actually be a positive sign, because that means that there is more awareness and there is access and recourse available if I want to escalate a concern, if that makes sense. Right. So we do not look at it as, oh my God, there are so many cases. There's, what is all hell needs to break loose in that BFSI sector. It's just that they are more compliant. People over there have better understanding of what is appropriate, and they're not taking things lying down. And like you correctly also mentioned, like, it's nobody is immune. If statistics to be believed, 30% of every woman has gone through sexual harassment at some point in time in her life. So that is not industry agnostic, right? So again, that also plays a role. Now, do you think what percentage choose to report? So now we've been seeing that these are the reported instances, and from the other industries, probably they're not reporting. And I said, right, Percy, 90% of from the film and entertainment industry. How many of them you think have actually reported? And do you think it's easy to report instances?
It's not easy to report,
not
but I
easy.
think 40 to 50% do report
40 to
in the
50%?
film industry. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. I'm looking at the chat as well. So there are folks who are saying, Zareen says around 15%, Beto says around 20%. Yeah. Let's look at what the statistics are saying. I think I can see somebody raising their hand. Yes. You want to say something?
Yeah.
Yeah, please go ahead.
In my opinion, at least in India, companies which have posh committees officially organized have a good percentage of reporting.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
I would, sure. No, thank you for that. And we are part of those POSH committees, and we do understand that, yes, there is, I would say, comparatively, the rate is much higher. So I would tend to agree comparatively with you for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. So these are again, and these are more on the global statistics, right? How many have actually faced, and this is across segments, and even in the parliament, in some of the instances of the numbers that you see on the screen currently, right? So if you see here, as per Forbes article, which came about, I think last year, said 50% of the people whom they spoke to have experienced it, but 55% of those 50% have chosen not to report it. And 40% of, if Harvard Business Review's survey is to be believed, which was again across sectors and segments, 40% women have since 1980s faced, and that percentage has not changed. It is still the same number. Out of those 40%, not even around 60% have chosen not to report it. And a third of the Australian Parliament, folks from the Australian Parliament have said that they have escalated. And this was an independent committee report, which was also alarming. And Australia, for those who are from that part of the world, probably are aware, are very, very big and very forward when it comes to gender-based laws and awareness of gender as well as sexual harassment. They have very stringent aspects, and they have something called as bystanders role when it comes to any form of violation, which we'll discuss shortly. But even there, where there is so much of awareness, and where there's not only awareness but also implementation of those awareness and sensitization that happens, even those areas is where they are seeing a surge. And why do you think that's happening? If you have to pinpoint a reason, right? It's not a problem which is India specific. It's clearly a global issue. Why do you think these instances are so prevalent, and why are people not talking about it? or even if they are talking about it, they're not talking about it to the right authorities? What comes in the way of, what is the hurdle according to you? If you had to pinpoint a reason for it, because the numbers are for themselves to speak, it'll make it worse or nothing will be done. Absolutely right, Zareen. And there's no bit that shows lack of faith in the system and the mechanism in place, probably, for sure. Any other reasons? Any other reason that you can think of, probably?
I think probably embarrassment, they don't want to be embarrassed,
Reputational damage.
Yeah.
So there's a reputational damage. Oh, if
Yeah.
I escalate, probably there's something wrong with me, or
Yeah.
people will start labeling and stereotyping me, right? I'll be termed as a troublemaker if
Correct. Yeah.
I escalate these issues, for sure. Okay. All right. I want you to maybe, like, we're looking at a more macro level, but I now want you to look at it from an individual perspective. I want all of you to sort of take a step back and maybe wherever you're sitting, or if you're standing during the session, whatever the case may be, I want you to think about your personal space. When you think about, this is my personal space, what is that you think about? If I have to ask you, what entails your personal space? And asking, this is more like an individual question that I want you to think about. What do you think, if I ask you what is your personal space, or if you define your personal space, what all aspects or elements do you think of when you think about your personal space?
What would give you privacy?
Okay, my privacy. So privacy is more like maybe physical, like where I am sitting out of?
Mm-hmm.
What kind? Okay. Any other things that you can think of? Any other aspects of your own? This is a very individual question that I'm asking all of you.
Boundaries?
Yeah, personal boundaries.
Yeah.
Correct. And those boundaries are what? Physical boundaries? Again, mostly?
It could be both, because
Mhm.
it depends on what I may consider as boundaries is not what the other person may consider sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. No, that's a good point as well. Like, it's not my boundary is not similar or even same to the other person's boundary, for sure.
My culture
Yeah.
does not allow certain boundaries to be
Yes.
expressed.
Yes.
And other culture that says it's all right, because they don't see anything wrong with it. So
Right.
when you're dealing with clients who are from a different culture, you need to know the boundaries and how you meet and what is considered as. But harassment is different. Harassment is different.
Absolutely. So I'm just moving away from that sort of discussion. We've discussed at a more macro level, like I said. Now I'm just thinking from a more individual perspective. I'm just breaking that concept down as to why is this happening and all of that. So from that lens, what I understand from the responses is my personal boundary or my privacy. Any other kinds of aspects or elements when it comes to understanding what is my personal space? Is it only physical, or can be other elements also? What constitutes my personal space? It's only physical, or it can be something else also, just out of curiosity, whatever you can think of. My dignity. Okay, so I think at a more cerebral level, then probably it's not only my physical space, but maybe also what people are telling me, or how I'm communicating with folks as well. Dolly, then, by that answer, can I take that away? Okay. Whenever we think of personal space, I think not only in this group, but whichever group I've asked this question, the first thing that comes to our mind is our personal physical space, right? But as human beings, we share a lot of boundaries, right? Those boundaries are not only physical. If I have to break it down, and psychologists say that we have around six types of boundaries at a human level. And this is only very specific to each individual. So we have intellectual boundaries. Intellectual boundaries are preferences, or some people we choose to have very intelligent conversations with. My emotional boundary may be different with different people, so I may be vulnerable in with few people, but I may not be having very intellectual conversations probably with them. My material boundaries are, of course, with whom I choose to share my material things with, my possessions with. My time boundaries, whom I choose to spend my time with, whether it's just sitting with them for a cup of coffee or maybe spending the entire day. It is my decision as to which person I want to spend what amount of time with, because time is very valuable. And of course, our sexual boundaries, right? So whom we share close physical proximity with, the physical intimacy, the levels of intimacy, all of this and all of these are unique to every individual. And somebody spoke of culture. Do you agree with when I say that culture, upbringing, and experiences also help in creating these boundaries that you see on the screen? A yes and no question. It's more like a yes and no. Yeah, would you agree that it's mostly my culture from where I come from, the upbringing where I come from, the experiences that I may have had in my life, which determine with whom I am. So, with what kind of people would I want to say spend my time with what kind of people I choose to have conversations, which are maybe only about, say, probably politics or finances, but not everybody I would want to be vulnerable before. Right. So again, and also if you've observed, my boundaries and your own boundaries, I'm talking about your own, all of these boundaries have also changed and evolved over a period of time. In fact, they change every single day. There are days when you wake up in the morning and you don't want to speak to anybody. And by the end of the same day, probably you're looking at and say, okay, I want to, maybe somebody should talk to me. Or I just want to go out and, just have a walk and just maybe socialize and mingle around. So again, it changes from time and also changes from person to person. But at the end of the day, who's deciding these boundaries for us? Can somebody else, can our spouse, partner, sibling, family member, relative, decide what are our boundaries or personal space, or do we get to decide and we get to choose?
It depends.
We get to decide.
Only us. There is nobody else who gets to choose that. Would you all agree with that statement?
No,
Yes.
it depends, Sana. It depends. Sometimes
Yes.
the situation may be one where I have to drop the boundaries.
Okay.
And I need to act. And that's okay. Then we say we decide. I decide. Correct. You're right.
Right.
Yeah.
Basically my decision, right? If I have to spend time or I have to probably share my emotions or share my material things or have conversations with, it's I decide, right? As an individual. Correct. Now, but do you think it's easy to assert my boundaries if supposing somebody is intruding into it? How many of you generally find it easy to say a no, generally in life? By show of hands, or just say a yes, or I'm just going back to screen. By just generally find it very easy to say a no and assert if you don't want to do something. I can very well easily say that no, I do not want to do this. I can see one yes on the chat. 2, 3 yeses. Okay.
Now it's not easily. You're using that word easily.
Yes.
So easily comes over a period of time if I have created that with me. Otherwise, situation to sit. What do you think?
Absolutely. No. If you ask me as an individual, I feel it's also very situation specific for me. Otherwise, I think in my head, I am quite assertive.
Yeah.
I'm able to assert my boundaries very easily. But that's my personality.
Yeah.
I'm also maybe in a position of privilege, probably.
Absolutely.
Right? That privilege may not be accessible and available to every individual that we encounter, even people who are working very closely with us.
Yeah.
Right? So again, being mindful of those aspects, that it is not easy to assert your own personal boundaries. And do you think that then it's easy to say or no when somebody is digressing and somebody is intruding it so much so as to cause sexual harassment? A lot of times people ask, why didn't you tell this before? You should have just talked about it, right? Why didn't you talk about these things before? Why did you not say the first time this happened to you? Why were you taking this conduct for such a long time? Because we need to be careful and mindful of the fact that it's not easy to say a no and to voice out our discomfort more often than not. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Right? And that's also coming in the way, because when I asked you the question and I was discussing the statistics, right? That why do you think people are not reporting it? There are alarming numbers. Majority of the folks who are undergoing this conduct are able to say it anonymously that yes, we have gone through this. But when it comes to actually reporting it, then that becomes a problem. The numbers come alarmingly down as well because of this very aspect. And it's very human, it's very unique, and plus it's not gender specific. let's not put gender to it just yet. It's very individual specific, irrespective of gender.
Absolutely.
Right now, when it comes to sexual harassment, I have to give you, and I can see people have gone slightly creative on the screen. If I can just request to people not to scribble on the screen, if that's okay, because it's also coming on the screen currently. So I'll just request folks to maybe not do that. I'm just trying to delete it for now, but yeah. So this is the definition, and I'm going by the definition what is laid down in the law. I'll cover the law, but more or less from whatever aspects and data or information that is available when it comes to understanding what sexual harassment really means and entails. These are the definition pointers. What you see on the screen currently is the definition as in the specific law for prevention of sexual harassment of workplace of 2013, which is there prevalent in India. So it covers physical contact and advances, it covers demand and request for sexual favors, sexually colored remarks, showing pornography, any other verbal, non-verbal conduct of sexual nature, even online sexual harassment instances are covered. Now, if I had to ask you to maybe, I think the first thing that comes to everybody's mind when you talk or hear instances about sexual harassment is the unwelcome physical contact in advance. We'll cover demand and request for sexual favors shortly, but when it comes to sexually colored remarks, what do you think that really entails? Can you give me examples of it? Again, it's not something, it can be, and usually we are talking from the workplace standpoint now. So if any are sexually colored, what do you mean by sexually colored? They are not, by the way, the same thing as racially colored. In fact, not even close. But if you have to give me an example, say complimenting somebody or maybe some jokes, can they be sexually colored?
Suggestive remarks.
Yeah. Okay. Like certain suggestive remarks, right? If and maybe I can share some examples. And there was this very so where this very senior person in an organization, I'm not, of course, not going to name the organization, where there were a lot of female employees in his team, and one of the female employee came up to him and said, "Look, I just want the leave for the day," and he kept on insisting and asking for the reason for the leave. And she was a bit hesitant, but then because he was so persistent and kept on asking, she said, because I've got my menstrual, periods, and so because I have, which I cannot today I've got a lot of pain because of that. So he said, okay, no problem. And then every time she came asking for a leave, he would follow up and ask whether she's got her menses or is she getting her menses on time. Every time she would be in an off mode, then he would ask her, are you PMSing? Is everything okay with you? Are you in pain because of your menstrual cycle and things like that? It became very intrusive and uncomfortable. There was another female in the same team who was going through an IVF treatment. I hope everybody understands when I say it's for pregnancy, for people who have problems getting pregnant, then there's an IVF treatment for that. And so he learns about it and he calls her and he said, why are you doing IVF? IVF is not good. It's not good for your health. It has a lot of long-term adverse health implications. I will show you positions that you can take with your husband at the time of intercourse, or you can ask your husband to take a cold shower before you get intimate. That will help you get pregnant. There are natural remedies available, and these were all unsolicited advice. This was not even asked. And when we asked the gentleman as to why you giving this, and by the way, this is all over WhatsApp, right? There were forwards on WhatsApp giving this kind of advice and showing the scientific reasoning for giving sort of advice. And we asked the gentleman that why are you giving this? And they are like my daughters and they're like my sisters. I consider them as my daughter and sister. And that's what he thought about. Like it became like maybe there was not an intention to sexually harass, but do you think that these questions were intrusive?
Yes,
Absolutely.
I think in personal, he's getting into personal situations, which is not correct.
Yeah, it's a personal choice and it's a personal space, and you can't ask questions about oh, are you PMSing? Are you going to get your menses? Are you having pain? That's not information that's for everybody volunteer. And yes, it had a sexual connotation to it. So here, maybe the intention was not there, but do you think there was an impact?
Tremendous. I mean,
tremendous impact. You can't rule that out.
I don't think there was no intention, because nobody talks like this unless you come from that frame of mind. You have no business to be talking about private things.
Yeah, but this
doesn't come in your purview of work. So
yeah.
She's not your daughter at work. She's your co-worker. So your relationship is different. And I'm sure you don't talk with your daughter like that.
Well, if he had to be
Well,
believed,
even
then
if you work, I mean, you have no
yeah.
business to talk to someone else's daughter.
Sure. Sure. And you said it, right, Shahnaz? You said it, it's my workplace. There are some professional boundaries that we have at our workplace. You may look like my daughter, you may look like my sister, but nobody is asking you to give you this advice, and then that becomes intrusive. And this is an example that I wanted to take in this forum, because this is also, and where the intention part also came into play, right? He was flummoxed, and he was wondering, why is this even a topic up for discussion? Because it was purely advice for their well-being and health, because for them, he considered them as their own. And when we asked him and we told him, look, there is an impact in the law. If you see from the Indian context again, intent is not relevant to a great degree. What supersedes is the impact of such instances, right? And when I talk about non-verbal conduct, I think the most prevalent form that we have encountered so far are instances of staring. I'm sure, do you agree that even staring can also be sexual harassment?
Oh, yes.
Or can be intrusive so as to be sexual harassment? Yeah. So it's not, and again, there was a very interesting case where this gentleman would, there are these people who just zone out and they blank out and then they're staring in oblivion.
Yes.
Something like that. Yeah. So there was this gentleman who was, yeah. And then there was this woman who comes up to us and says that, there's this person, I don't know the person's name, but just the way he looks, it's very uncomfortable. And we were like, okay, we were in a fix because we did not know who this person was. We ran, and it was a huge organization. Like one floor had around more than 100 folks on each floor. So we randomly selected people, like 4 to 5 people, and asked them that, hey, is there anything untoward? Is there anything is everything okay with you? And that guy's name did come up. And when we called him, he was a complete recluse. Again, there was he no, except for his manager, nobody even knew his name. He did not talk to anyone in the organization. But in spite of which, he had managed to make not just 1 but 4 to 5 women uncomfortable just merely by looking at them. And then when we asked him that, what is up and why is this happening, we realized that there were concerns. And in this situation, right, what is the kind of action do you think should be taken against this individual? Say, assuming that there was no intent, assuming that the person was oblivious to the fact that he's made so many people uncomfortable because of the way he stands and stares in a particular way. Should there be any action against this person? And if yes, then what kind of action would you suggest?
Maybe some training.
Yeah. So some counseling probably, right? Counseling or training and
your
sensitization.
non-verbal stance needs to be looked into.
Right.
And though you may not think it that way, so we do it at workplace counseling. That's what we do.
Yeah.
So we kind of talk it out, and many times there's nothing there in it. It's only the person is not even aware that it's happening.
Yeah, but see, lack of awareness is not an excuse, right? To make other people.
Absolutely. So when it happens, you've got to pick it up and understand whether there is intent or no intent.
Correct.
Once you analyze that, then you take it forward.
Sure. No, and I'll tell you what. So that's the best part about, or well, for lack of a better word, the best part is that intention is not material when you're taking the allegation. But yes, we do consider the intention and the circumstances as a committee when we're looking into instances to determine what action I would take against the individual. Not that the person is off the hook because the person had no intention. That's something I want to highlight here as well. Okay, so when it comes to conduct like this, and when given this pretext that we are discussing, intention may not play such a big role. Have you heard of this phrase, quid pro quo? Does this ring a bell? Quid pro quo. Have you heard of this phrase? Okay, don't worry if it doesn't as well. Quid pro quo basically is a Latin phrase which means this for that. If you give me something that I want, I will give you something that you need. But if you do not give me what I want, I will take away from you what you need because I have the power. Again, statistically speaking, this is right from the Me Too movement that we saw across the world to what we see right now in the cases that we're handling. If I have to talk numbers, quid pro quo, or where the respondent, so the person against whom the complaint is filed is referred to as a respondent, and the respondent is in a position of authority or power. And power does play a role in instances when it comes to any form of abuse, and sexual harassment is not an exception. And if I have to say that quid pro quo also, if I have to put numbers to it again, since we have done a research very recently, 70 to 80% of the cases that we've handled where the respondent were in a position of authority. Right? This is a quid pro quo, and it's also a separate form where I have put the person in a position either overtly or subtly by my implications, saying that, oh, if you do not give in to this, then there would be repercussions on your appraisals, on your job, even your reputation. Right? And usually we have seen that there have been, when people in authority have been involved, the action taken against such individuals also of a higher and more serious nature, because when it's senior people involved, it's usually the consequences of such conduct becomes much more higher and graver, right? Have you heard of this term? Do you think sexual harassment creates hostile work environment? I think everybody would agree with me. But since this definition is so wide that it even covers acts by implication. Now, what does that mean? Say in my environment, like on this Zoom call right now, for example, I'm not saying that that was happening, but say on this Zoom call, if there are a group of people, right, passing comments about each other's, say, sex lives or passing double meaning jokes, okay, and I'm overhearing this conversation, can I be sexually harassed by the virtue of that conversation? It's more like a question, not a situation that has actually happened here on this call, just specifying that.
Yes.
Yeah. So the hostile work environment sort of says that if I am also in an environment where these conversations are happening repeatedly and are rampant and are sexually suggestive, that is creating a hostile work environment for me, and I can also file in case of sexual harassment. Right? So again, that's how wide the definition is from the Indian law perspective. And I've also seen it across sort of segments across the global definitions that I have encountered so far. Hostile work environment and having these conversations, even in board meetings or over WhatsApp groups or in virtual calls, are also something that you need to be mindful of, especially when they are work-related and workplace conversations. Right? I'm sure you've heard of the word consent. I hope the consent word. What does consent mean? We've been talking about boundaries. We spoke about saying a no. But what does consent mean?
Permission.
Permission. Just or consent simply means saying a yes. Okay. So if I have to put it very sort of in a straightforward manner, consent means which is any saying a yes when it's informed, when I'm sober, and when it's enthusiastic, and when I also have the choice of going back from that consent. So I've said a yes does not mean it's yes for every time. So if I'm asking my peer for dinner, if the person comes to me, comes with me for the first time, can I assume that every time for every day the person is okay coming with me for dinner? It's not that. It's not like a series of yes that I've given just by saying yes once. Do you think it looks different though in the workplaces? This is actually very simple to understand, right? But do you think it looks different in workplaces? Is it that simple? We've all discussed, right, how it is difficult to say a no. Do you think it's easy to say a yes then?
No.
No, yeah. So in again, consent in workplace. And what about romantic relationships at workplace? Do you think that can also happen?
That's a big thing.
Yeah.
You need to be actually it to be worked out in the orientations also, so that people are aware of certain rules, boundaries that we have, and because it impacts work, It impacts,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what. So a lot of organizations now have anti-dating policies. They have dating disclosure policies. They have dating fraternization policies, or quite a few have no policies at all. In either of the cases, there are different aspects that we need to keep in mind. When it comes to consensual relationships, usually the organizations do not get involved.
Absolutely.
Right? Because there are consensual relationships. But where do they get involved is to ensure that those two persons are not working the same team, because if there is personal relationships that are being shared and things like that. That is either whether you have dating policies in your in your workplace or not. What I also want to highlight is that if things go south in romance at workplaces, does that automatically give the right to any of the partner of that relationship to escalate a case of sexual harassment? I think you will all agree that there could be potential sexual abuse in relationships, right? In personal, intimate relationships. You can't rule that out. Okay. Usually when it comes to intimate relationship or intimate partners, and if there is abuse in intimate partners, again, usually organizations do not get involved, even for sexual abuse. There is a separate law in a lot of countries, especially India as well, which talks about domestic violence. That's where the distinction needs to be drawn. However, interestingly, that one thing you should know, that as per India, there is no consent when it comes to a position of authority and when a position of authority and when the woman is not in a position of authority. So for example, if the guy, and I'm being gender specific here because that's what the law is as well. If the guy is in a senior position and the girl or in a fiduciary position, in a position of any sort of control over the woman, and has into even in a consensual relationship, things go south, and if she chooses to escalate it, it's considered as an offense in the country. Right? If time permits, I will show this section also, but I just wanted to highlight this, that there is consensual relationships are something that the law doesn't explicitly cover, but does give importance to the concept of consent, and that's something that we need to understand. Right? But any questions on this before I move on to the next part?
Sana, I always ask myself, why does this happen?
That's a good question, and that's my next slide as well. You're absolutely right.
Because
I also want to debrief on that. So, yeah, what causes sexual harassment, right?
Did you see a bully, a child was a bully right throughout his childhood, as he grew into power, and he uses his power, now he wields power differently.
Yeah.
So, personalities, what is it?
No, I hear you. I think power plays a major role, right? We live in a, so I think predominantly, I won't say completely, but predominantly it's a patriarchal society. So right now the power imbalance lies with a certain gender. But I'm not ruling out the possibility of if there is a power imbalance, so there are power dynamics that will definitely play a role in forms of abuse. And like I said earlier, sexual harassment is no different. So power dynamics and the role that power plays in this kind of a act cannot be negated. Right? So understanding your responsibilities, and I'll give you maybe a very legal answer also. Like if you see, so if a police officer commits a crime, the say an offense of robbery, for example, the punishment is around 7 years. But if a layman commits it, the punishment is around 3 years. There's a disparity even in the kind of punishment because there's a position of power and authority there. Because if there is a robbery, I would go to the policeman, right? But if the policemen themselves are engaging in it, then where does one go? If I'm sexually harassed, then I'll go to my manager. But if my manager is sexually harassing me, then where does one go? Right? So again, power does play a major role. What about this? Do you agree that lack of understanding or no understanding of consent, not taking no for an answer, or and we've heard this phrase so many times. I'm sure you're familiar with the term no means no, right? But sometimes no is not a complete sentence for a lot of folks, and it does become do you take no for an answer, and then again all of those lack of understanding under the guard of even saying that I truly love the individual and how else do I express and things like that. By the way, stalking in the Indian context of things or repeatedly following is an offense since 2013 in India. So again, that's not information that many people have, but yes, it's an offense which is a non-bailable offense now with up to 7 years of imprisonment. But again, there is a lot of lack of consent. So whenever we're having discussions, or maybe just lack of understanding, or they just don't want to understand it. There's no desire to understand also. So again, those are one of the causes as per our research. Do you think sexism or sexist attitude and approach can be a cause for sexual harassment?
I was coming to that.
Yeah. And let me just also, sorry, yes, Sharnaz, were you saying something? Or I don't know, somebody was saying something, I don't know. Okay. Right. So I was saying that sexism, basically in itself, let's understand what the term sexism means. Sexism means sex-based discrimination. Discriminating, saying that, oh, you are a woman, so you can't do this kind of a job, or you're too emotional for a man, so I don't think you're suited for this kind of a job. These are all sexist attitude and approach. And in our experience, again, we also wanted to debrief, right? We wanted to understand why sexual harassment taking place. And this was also one of the most prevalent reasons. That if there is a sexist attitude and approach in any workplace, in any forum, in any sphere of society, it is almost, I can safely say with some sense of responsibility that it's inevitable that sexual harassment will also take place. But I do want to demarcate that sexism without any sexual connotation is not sexual harassment. I don't want to draw that distinction also. I'm not for a minute endorsing it, but yes, it is that mindset needs to change, that awareness and sensitization needs to come about to change the mindset and attitude for us to ultimately hope to prevent these things from happening rather than redressing them.
Can I come in with an example?
Yes, please do. Please do.
So in my experience, as I was doing a training once, this lady comes up and she was very upset during the training. She says, "What's wrong?" She said, "I've just returned from my maternity leave. I am not given my position back again. I've been asked to, not touch anything that involves making quick decisions or snap decisions, or, oh, you won't be able to do this. Now you will have time. You won't have time for this, etc." And her whole career graph was, downsized.
Okay.
Not that she was not capable. She was very capable. And she says, whom do I talk to about this? Because they always look upon me as someone who is vulnerable now because I'm a mother and I will not be able to give that time. They are assuming that. They're assuming that. So when women come back from maternity leave, they face this kind of, you won't be able to do that now. Let it be, kind of. This affects their careers very badly sometimes. It's hurting because you're capable. It doesn't matter. You're coming back to work. You're not saying, and you're completing tasks on time. You're doing everything, and yet you're being. When it comes to your final, your end of the year assessment, no, you're kept aside.
Okay.
So,
Shaina, is this happening in the Indian context?
Yes, I'm giving you an example of an Indian context.
Got it.
I work with organizations.
Sure.
I get to know these things.
Sure. So this is not sexual in nature. Whatever you have defined is not sexual harassment, but this is a violation of another law. We have the Maternity Health Benefit Act. And in that, it's clearly laid down. There's not only the benefit that you are supposed to get during that 6-month period, but also that you cannot be denied promotion or you cannot be discriminated against when you're back, also forms an integral part of that law. So the ideal situation in this situation would have been to go to the HR of the organization who would then address these concerns. It's not sexual in nature. I'm not again saying that it's not wrong, but it does not, it's definitely, sorry.
I thought it was gender bias.
It's definitely gender bias.
Man does not have to go on maternity leave. Man does not have to do the childbearing and come back with an emotional. I mean, there's so much happening to the lady, and she's coming back to work as a leader of the group, and you don't see that.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I think that's what I wanted to also say, that that's a distinction that I want to draw. Saying that, when we change this whole mindset, that we understand, and there's a principle called equity. We are talking about equality here. You understand the term equity?
Mm-hmm.
When there are, say, women-based laws or laws for a particular vulnerable part of the society, they are, or in favor of a particular segment of the society, they are based on the principle of equity. Equity basically means nothing but to give a level playing field or provide a level playing field to people who do not have access. Say if I have to build a ramp in a building to access that building, right? It's a ramp that I have built for the disabled person or for a person on a wheelchair to access that building. That's based on the principle of equity, right? So again, that's where all these laws are coming from, Shainas, and even gender-based discrimination of various forms. Maternity being one of them is covered under a separate law. right? But why the distinction is being drawn between sexual harassment and gender-based discrimination is because the law says so, and there are specific redressal mechanism in place from an Indian context.
Absolutely.
And that's why we have that distinction in place.
Thank you.
No worries. And on that note, do you think it's only happening with women?
No,
And we
no,
all
no.
agree to that, right? How many genders are you aware of? There's male, female, but what do you understand by the term gender? How many genders is everybody aware of? I can see some very interesting responses in the chat though. Not on the topic, but just a previous discussion that we were having. Yeah. Okay. Have you heard of the LGBTQIA plus spectrum?
Mhm.
Okay, so let's break that down a little bit and just make me like, do you think it's worse for the LGBTQIA plus folks? Or do you think it's the same when it comes to the instances that they may have to go through? LGBTQI plus basically means lesbians, gays, bis, transgenders, queers, intersex, asexual plus. That's what it means. I'll break these terminologies down shortly, but do you think it's worse it's different, much worse? You're absolutely right. And let me just break down the understanding of that term firstly for the benefit of everyone in this group today. Right? So what do you understand by gender? And this is a very basic thing that we are actually teaching people. Nobody taught us, at least me, in school about gender, sexual orientation, about but gender identity. This was all things I learned much later in life, unfortunately. But now the conversations are changing, and we are having this is a gingerbread person. So we have these conversations now again from the Indian context of things in schools where we are teaching about gender identity spectrums and all of those other aspects at maybe to 5 and 6 year olds. We're teaching them about good touch and bad touch at the age of 3 and 4 years. We were never taught that in school. It's not that these things were not happening, but we're just learning about these conversations now. If I have to break this down and make you understand, so we are assigned certain sex at birth, right? Male genitalia, female genitalia. There's intersex variations where you have an amalgamation of male and female genitalia. That's a biological phenomenon. There is gender expression. So I may be born with a certain assigned sex, but I may choose to express my gender in a certain way. And there's my sexual orientation is with whom I am attracted towards, sexual attraction, right? So these are three different aspects that I want you to keep in mind to understand this spectrum completely. The LGBTQIA plus spectrum is an amalgamation of a lot of aspects, one being sexual orientation, one being gender identity, and one being gender expression. So for example, my name is Sana Hakim, my pronouns are she and her. I am an assigned female, and my gender expression is also female. Okay. But even if my gender assigned was female, and if I am expressing myself as a female, but I'm attracted hypothetically to another female, that makes me a lesbian. If I'm a guy who is born with an assigned sex with male genitalia, and I'm also expressing myself as a guy, but I'm attracted towards other men, that makes me gay. If I'm attracted towards both genders, whatever irrespective of my assigned gender and assigned sex, it makes me a bisexual. Transgender person is where my assigned sex does not match with my gender expression. So I may be a female or male at birth, but my expression is not aligned with my assigned sex. That makes me a trans person. And queer is somebody that's an umbrella term which covers a lot of other gender non-binary identities. Intersex variations where, like I had mentioned earlier, biologically, it's an amalgamation of male and female genitalia. Do you want to take a guess as to how many intersex variations are there that we are aware of? It's a biological phenomenon, by the way. It's just something that you're born with. You want to take a guess? The number, it was news to me also. I learned about the number 3 years back, although I practice in this space. But yeah, it was quite alarming for me also to know. There are 75 intersex variations. It was quite alarming for me. So again, this is a biological thing, and it's not discussed. At least it wasn't discussed in my school or college, for that matter. And then there is asexual. Asexual again is a sexual orientation where I am not attracted to any gender. I do not experience any sexual attraction of whatsoever nature. Right now, when it comes to legalities of other gender, right? What we need to understand is that there are India-specific laws. So a lot of, as per the, if I have to look at the POSH Act, the POSH Act is applicable for corporate sectors or private establishment where my organization has 10 or more employees. The law mandates you need to have a policy, you need to have an internal committee to look in redress complaints of sexual harassment. A lot of times, a lot of organizations also have gender fluid or gender neutral policies. Okay, again, although the law is gender specific, but a lot of organizations have gone above and beyond and are also going about with gender fluid policy. What that means is that person of any gender, if they are going through any conduct of sexual nature, they can report it to the committee by virtue of their policy. We have also the Transgender Persons Act, which came about in 2019, and it's been applicable since 2020. And I don't know whether are you all aware that the Indian laws have changed quite a lot from, the criminal law has changed. IPC has now turned to Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita since 1st of July this year. And as per this law, very interestingly, 2 sexual assault provisions or provisions of sexual violations have been made gender agnostic. So sexual harassment is also a criminal offense, but that's gender specific. But say if I'm assaulting somebody or pulling somebody's clothes to sexually harass them, or I am engaging to voyeuristic conduct. Does voyeurism make sense to everyone? Everybody knows what's voyeurism? So voyeurism is where I am viewed. So for example, if I'm viewed in a personal private position, so if a person is changing clothes or person is using the shower or is using the washroom or having intercourse and does not obviously want public viewing, but is being viewed or is being photographed or videographed, that's voyeuristic conduct. And it's an offense. And it's an offense which is where anybody, irrespective of the gender, by the virtue of this law, you can escalate it. Right? However, stalking and sexual harassment still are gender-specific provisions from the criminal law side of things. Now, interestingly, when I was seeing, laws and drawing a comparative, since we have folks from other countries also, there are no specific laws in the US of A when it comes to addressing concerns of sexual harassment at workplace. But they mandate awareness and sensitization in few states like Illinois, California, and New York. Interestingly, though, a lot of so-called developing nations have specific laws on sexual harassment or to redress and address sexual harassment at the workplace. Those being India, of course, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and even China and Brazil have specific legislation specifying what is sexual harassment, what is not, specifying what is the redressal mechanism needs to be in place. In UK, there's something called as the Equality Act, where interestingly, the onus is put on the employers, where if there are any cases of sexual harassment happening at the workplaces from the UK standpoint, the employers are vicariously liable. That means they have not been able to maintain certain environment in the workplaces, and hence employers will have to pay a compensation for that basis on whatever the courts decide. I'll just pause here. I'm almost towards the end. I'm also cognizant of the time, but if there is any question at this point in time, please feel free to sort of ask that. Okay. And this is actually my last slide. And like I said, I wanted to sort of end on a positive note. We've been discussing so much, right? This is a heavy. We talked about the statistics, we talked about boundaries, we talked about consent, we talked about the laws. But do you think prevention is possible when it comes to conduct of this nature? I'm a hopeless optimist. If you ask me, I will say yes. I'll say, of course, it is possible. We advocate and propagate in this space. So for us, it's a dream. Maybe I'm being utopian about it, but why not? Yes, Percy.
Yes, I think sexual harassment can be avoided
Yes.
by having strict laws in the workplace. government guidelines are already there. Have a CCTV which is monitored. And if there is any complaint, you can easily find out who was playing the mischief, you know. So that sort of awareness puts everybody on their guard, and they will not try to indulge in anything, at least in the office.
Okay.
So, and that is what we are doing in our office also. There are very strict guidelines.
Right.
And CCTV monitoring. So that is one way of preventing it.
No, I hear you. I think it's important awareness. So what I see that what you're doing in terms of steps is awareness and also taking some coercive steps if required, right? And ensuring that there's that CCTV surveillance at all times, that you are aware and acutely aware that if you do something untoward, then there could be consequences.
Correct.
Yeah, for sure. Well, a lot of countries, thanks to CCTV cameras, are able to curb their crime rates. This can be one of them, for sure. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Percy. Any other and some steps that we have seen going a long way is definitely awareness. And there's something called as a bystander rule. Have you heard of the bystanders rule? No, I agree with you, Persis, 100%. And that's what I'm about to also discuss. It's not only retribution, but also change in beliefs and assumptions, which is harder to accomplish. And like I said, and we have changed, and I'll tell you where I'm coming from, okay? I'm not being very unrealistic when I say that. 5 years back or 7 years back when we started, right? We used to go to organizations and say, you know, hey, there is a law. You need to have sensitization and awareness on this topic for the compliance of this law. And we've had employers tell us, no, please, ma'am, don't talk about it. If you talk about it, there will be instances. Everybody's like brother and sister here. Please just don't talk about it. So, and now from the same organization, we've had very advanced and nuanced conversation with the same folks. So I feel we have seen a sea change in the attitudes and beliefs of why these conversations need to happen and how they need to also grow and be also contextual. How times are changing and contextual with times. And yes, Dolly, unfortunately, that is a reality, but the laws are stringent and this is an organization-based law. So where there's a time limit for the internal committee to take into instances, I'm talking from Indian context again, a 90-day upper limit is there. So there's a timely redressal also when it comes to, that's why we are egging on folks to sort of, and doing some faith and confidence building also about the committee in organizations whenever we have these sessions. But yes, I was mentioning, and this is the note I want to end on also about the bystanders. Do you know what's a bystanders rule? Who are bystanders, firstly?
People who are standing around watching.
Yeah, exactly. Who are just watching something.
The dictionary, there's thing for it.
Yeah. Sorry, I just maybe answer Dolly's question. Dolly, timely redressal is 90 days as per law, within which the internal committee in an organization needs to close the case. That's what I mean by timely redressal. I hope that answers. Yeah, so coming back, so bystanders basically means people who watch something off happening or wrong happening and choose to ignore it or not do anything or maybe laugh it off, even worse, if you ask me. But I think what now that's changing, and I heard of a certain. I was reading an article that day which talked about how Australia, interestingly, has put the onus on some bystanders where there is violation, including sexual harassment happening, and if you choose to just look at it and not do anything about it. And not do anything about it would mean that not going to the person concerned and educating them or even escalating it to the right authority anyway. I mean, just not doing anything about it is no longer an option. But if you choose not to do anything about it, you can also be prosecuted as per certain Australian guidelines, where the onus is put that if something wrong is happening and you're privy to that information, and if you choose to sit on it, then you're equally accountable and answerable. And that's where I think, and that's also want to end that we do not need to be any more silent and mute spectators. And I'm sure not in this forum, there would be silent and mute spectators, but I thought I'll just put it for everybody's information that that's something that we are also highlighting in our awareness and sensitization programs whenever we do. That even if you're not at the receiving end, but if you're viewing something, please raise your voice. You need not always be an activist and go and confront, but there are ways and avenues of just reaching out to the impacted person, speaking to them, or just reaching out anonymously to being a whistleblower and things like that. There are a lot of avenues available for bystanders also to take a stand. All right. Apart from the other discussions that we've had, which go a long, long way. Thank you so much, everyone, for engaging and being a part of this conversation. I hope this was helpful, and I will just maybe stop sharing the screen right now.
Sana, thank you very, very much for this very interesting session. And yes, my daughter, who is a school counselor in Copenhagen, Denmark, left a message. She said, believe in that person. Call things out when you see or hear them if they feel it is safe, because then it will be that you let the person know it's not okay to do, and that you've seen, heard it, and it will make the victim feel less alone. Also, help and check on that person afterwards and go with them to report it. So that is very, very useful to all of us. And again, thanks a lot to all who have participated. Now I will hand it over to Yasmin Madora to do the formal vote of thanks. Go ahead, Yasmin.
Sana, thank you very much for educating us on this very heavy topic. You educated us on the rights of employees and obligations of employers across sectors. It's a very heavy topic, but you simplified it beautifully for us. You talked about personal boundaries and roles of intersectional and cultural contexts. We understood boundaries are of various natures, not only physical. You talked about impacted individuals. It's not only women, it's men, LGBTQ, all kinds, every gender that you can think of. The concept of consent and its application of the personal and professional context, it was very well explained. You simplified legal understanding of scope of what is and what is not sexual harassment. We thoroughly enjoyed your talk because it was very interactive. And I would like to thank all the participants, which made it very interesting. I would like to thank Ketayun for organizing this session, the WE team for helping in, and I would like to thank Percy Master for his very, for his thoughts that he told us about women when he started the session. It was a very, very interactive and interesting session. Thanks to all of you around the globe, and good night to some and good morning to the others. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone. This was lovely for me as well. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Yasmin, and thank you all for participating, and look forward to seeing you again in the new year when we have the next WE webinar. Okay, have a nice day, everybody. Thanks. Thank you, Sana, very much for doing this session for us. Okay,
Thanks.
bye-bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
WE. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Sana. Take care. Hope to
Yeah.
see you sometime.
Bye.
Take care.